Here we've got one of those really awesome AP Calc questions where in order to find the answer, we usually have to go through A through E to test them all to make sure we get what we're looking for. This problem wants us to find which pair of functions down below, if we put them into this limit as x approaches infinity of the f of x equation divided by the g of x equation, would give us out the value of infinity. And so when we're doing this, this is really limits at infinity. You can kind of break into three options on how these things could possibly work out. So option one is what I refer to as top heavy. When I say top heavy, I've got top heavy, bottom heavy, and balanced. What we're referring to is where you would find what is known as the dominant term. They also refer to this as the leading behavior. Which function out of all of the equation would actually dominate this term and lead the behavior of the graph for very, very large values of x? Generally, this is the highest power of x. You're kind of used to seeing that. But sometimes they can throw in exponential functions. And what you want to know is that powers of x are always going to get dwarfed by exponential functions. No matter what that power on the x is, e to the x, 5 to the x, anything that's an exponential function is always going to beat out some x to the third, x to the 100, whatever that might be. And so exponentials are always greater than powers of x. So they always are the dominant term. So getting back to the idea of top heavy, if I've got two functions where my limit is x heads to infinity, let's say I've got like 7x to the fifth plus 8x over 9x to the third plus 7. If my dominant term is strictly on top, then what's happening there is that this equation, the top is growing out of control, and there's really nothing the bottom can do to stop it. So it's like having infinity over 1. So that would be headed to infinity. Option 2, and we're going to talk through all of them because you might run into problems that aren't asking for infinity. Option 2 is the reverse of option 1. This is what I call bottom heavy. So in that scenario, the bottom of the fraction is where your dominant term lives. So if you had 9x to the third plus 7 over 7x to the fifth plus 8, if that dominant term is on bottom, you essentially have the flip thing that we just had. So the bottom is getting huge. That number is headed to infinity, and there's nothing the top can do to stop it. So 1 divided by infinity, that's like a decimal point with a ton of zeros, right, at 1. And so really what that's saying is that this is headed to 0 always. So if you get a bottom heavy situation, you know that you're headed to 0. And then our third option here is what you would call, or what I would call, balanced. And so in a balanced situation, we've got equal dominant terms on top and bottom. So maybe we've got 9x to the fifth plus 7 over 7x to the fifth plus 8. Here we have equal dominant terms, and so they are growing at the same pace. The only difference is the one on top always gets multiplied by a 9, and the one on bottom here is always getting multiplied by a 7. So they're growing at the same rate, but they're getting multiplied by different values. So what we end up finding is the coefficients of whatever those dominant terms are going to be what we're looking at. So this problem wants to know when we're going to be getting out infinite as an answer. So we're looking for when our answer here would be infinite, which means we're looking for the situation where we're having a top heavy. So if we look at the equation that they gave us, we're looking at the limit as x approaches infinity of f of x over g of x. And so what we know is in order to get top heavy, we need the f of x equation. That needs to be the dominant equation in our setup. And so only an answer that has the f of x as the dominant scenario is going to win that race upwards to infinity. So looking back through our problems here, looking at A right now, again, this is the glorious part about doing these things, is we have to come in and start looking for our dominant term. Well, on f of x, the highest power there would be x to the third. It beats out 5x. Looking at g of x, I have x to the third and I have the natural log of x. Natural log of x is like the worst of the bunch. Natural log of x fits at the very back end of our list here. Of all of the things that are headed up to infinity, natural log is the slowest of all of them getting there. So he's kind of in the last place scenario. So the natural log isn't what our dominant term is on this one. Our dominant term here would be x to the third. And so what we can see is we have equal dominant terms on top and bottom. So this one would have been a balanced scenario. So that's not going to head to infinity. Going on and looking at b, the f of x, the top equation, the dominant term there was x to the fourth. On g of x, there's only one term, it's x to the seventh. That would have been the dominant term there. This time, the dominant term, it would have been on the bottom, because g of x is on the bottom of our equation. So this would have been the dominant term. That would have been bottom heavy, and anything that's bottom heavy is always headed to 0. So b is not what we're looking for. Going on to c now, the top would have been 5 to the x. That's an exponential function. And then the bottom here is a power of x. And so that is top heavy. The winner on that would have been the one on top because it is the exponential, and the exponential beats out a power of x. So C is our answer right now because that would have been top heavy, and all top heavy head to infinity. If you look through the rest of them, kind of going through just to make sure we see them all and understand what's happening. Looking at D right now, on D, the top, the f of x, the dominant term would have been e to the x. Exponentials beat out powers of x. On the bottom, we would have also had e to the x as the dominant term. This time, the situation, we've got equal dominant terms on top and bottom, so that would have been balanced. That would have had a value of 7 over 8. That's not the right answer. And then as we look at our last one here, we've got natural log over natural log. So again, those would have been balanced. And so balanced would not be what we're looking for. That would have been equal dominant terms. And so that would have ended up being 7 over 5. So that's not our answer either. So our option would have been option C. If you can learn how to quickly solve these infinite limit problems, you'll make your life a heck of a lot easier than having to divide everything by the highest power of x. Thanks for watching my video. If you liked it, please click that like button and subscribe. And also share it with your friends and anyone else you know who might be crying about an upcoming AP Calc test. You can find more videos from me, more sample AP Calc questions, and my complete AP Calc study guide over at my website, apcalcprep.com. Have a great one.